Okay. So this is Captain Sweep, Elijah Gatti from with the field, and we're about to jump into exploring. I don't know. That's what we're going to figure out today. We're going to figure out exactly what we want to have done by our interactions, what sort of deliverables, what's the results that we want, and because I don't think there's any. This has to be custom designed. And I find that when I'm around somebody, I've always sort of got downloads about them. And then now the tools are developed to such an extent where there's a lot of different things we could do. And so I think if at the beginning, we sort of went through, from your point of view, if you could have anything, for your ideal, if you could snap your fingers and go, this is what I want, or this is what I need. This is what I think Captain Sweet, let's say, can help me do that. And then I'll do the same in terms of all my own needs analysis. It's more of a needs analysis combo, I would say. And then once I've heard yours and you've heard mine, then we'll sort of come to an agreement around actually what's possible. And then we'll just go from there.
Okay.
Okay. So why don't you start?
Well, tracking back for myself, I was going through depression a couple weeks back, feeling the existential edge of what is the meaning of things and seeing my limits and lack of options because of some of my limits, and just feeling frustrated a little bit. And we touched in. And so part of the context for me was touching into what type of conversation field. It's like whether you talk about family, business, entrepreneurial. So it's like, for me, I guess I was hoping for a bit of a friendship space in conjunction with as it regards the inflow matrix or the cards and the deeper vision that you're working on. I'm even just pulling out the cards and having a question together and using the cards and seeing if there's insight that comes out of that, synchronicity, potentially tracking through a few conversations to see, as we might pull up cards and start to have engaged conversations based on what's coming up and what questions we're forming, to see if there's a pattern that's evolving, both in our conversation styles, what's important to us in regards to our sharing context, defining more clearly what the field is that we are engaging through, in terms of is it friendship and camaraderie and building more context. I know you've been going through your own edges with that you can talk about if you want to or not. So in that context, or in regards to that, we have some similar undertones that we're working through in our life, I think. Partly dependent on the times that we're in, partly dependent on the age that we're at. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, just as a sound bite to see what your feedback is.
Okay. Okay, that's good to hear. Because I definitely there's a lot of different ways we could go in a sense, right? There's a,
Mhm.
but one thing that we have quite a lot of shared background and context. We've known each other now over 20 years
Yeah,
around, right? So,
yeah,
in terms of my own work, you've sort of tracked it in and out more than most. And you're of that mindset in a sense of playing a lot in abstract worlds.
yeah. I like words and maps and different ways of thinking about things and how we track that through different modes.
Okay, I'm thinking as I give mine, I'm gonna go one-way download, okay, rather than two-way transmission.
Sorry?
I prefer to sort of do a one-way download rather than a two-way talk at this time.
Yeah, so you have something you want to share then?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm doing, man. Um, and so, there aren't really that many people, let's say, that have that continuity with me, at least to a certain extent, to sort of track at least what I've been trying to do or I have been doing, right? And seeing, there is some coherence. And I bring those two words specifically because last time coherence and continuity were two words that to me were at the core of, I don't know your existential stance, but just what I was taking from the last time that I saw you was, and again, this is my, I get, everything's my interpretation, but it's not written in stone at all because usually we're coming at things from such a different place. And to even begin to interpret you or where you're at is not something I think I could do, and it may be, but I'm trying in a sense of going, okay, what happens if I could help you figure out an internal structure for your biggest philosophical either questions or angst or just what you play in, and then begin to make a card set, because I found that when I was looking at possibility management, when I was starting to add in all these new choice cards, it's beautiful to add in new words with new meanings that you never use, or that you rarely use, or that you just, whatever your definitions are going to be, they're not at all going to be the ones I would choose, right? Or the dictionary. That's the thing about, let's say, an originator playing with their own world, where you actually have, a set of concepts you're playing with. And once they're put into the card form, one, I can get to, that's my method to understand, kind of like just to put it in a simple form and put it in something that can be moved around. And then to me, it's like, you start to add, and I did this once with somebody else who wrote a book afterwards, and it was like distilling down their essential concepts. Like, what are the basics for them that they would use to whether structure their chapters or just, we came up with 12 essential concepts for this client in a sense. And they ended up writing a book. And they said the process that we went through was very, very good for them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so, whether, I know you have card set, I mean, maybe not the full thing, and you have a harmonizer, right?
Yeah.
So again, you're one of the few people who have the tools, who have used them, because we went through, I don't know, one or two a series of sessions, right? You were in a couple of them, weren't you? Or at least one.
Yeah, more like probably 3 or 4, but a couple of them lasted for like 6 months at a time or something.
Yeah. So you're somebody who, one of the few people who's actually played with the divination, with a team, with a table. So you have that background. So, and it works. It works in a way that's magical. And since the synergizer, which is basically the same as the harmonizer, a little bit, different structure. But I see the synergizer Because, you know, all the time that I know you're not known you, I've done these practices. And just seeing, you know, the type of communication, the type of conversations, I've seen something that happens that's reproducible, that's good for humans. That to me is something that you can charge money to humans to do as a facilitator. And so I thought about, you know, part of the business model I'm working with is making tools to help facilitators make a living. And at different times, we, let's say, discuss that, but I've never really been in a great professional position, let's say, to be able to do it. I've just tested it out for myself, but was never really, anyway, there's a lot to whatever I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're one of the only people who has had that experience, has their own table, has their own cards, and again, looking at the community side of things and looking at, you know, what I know about you wanting to build a community, I think there's alignment there for bringing people in to sit down to have important discussions around what's important to them. But then is like, it can be a community service that you just offer. You don't have to charge, or you can charge. It's up to you, right? Like, it's kind of, because I'm the manufacturer, I'm looking at it in different methodologies, but from you, the user, it may seem foreign to charge people to sit around a table and have a discussion or something, right? So it's sort of up to you, depending if you ever want to do that. But the idea being that the tools are used for an actual like career, for somebody who wants to be a facilitator and wants to, let's say, do coaching, wants to get into the more knowledge and performance side of life. And so I've seen, because you're getting older and you're in a very physical, laborious work, that I think at some point we would like to make money based upon our knowledge rather than our labor. And that's one of the things I would look at this doing in terms of finding what is necessary to make that happen and to train you or to get you the tools or whatever it is to get you going in this regard. So that's my underlying big context these days, because I've worked on this a long time and it's about time I'm getting ready to bring things into the world. And I'm kind of, I don't know if it's loyalty or it is loyalty. It's just like, for the people who've been there, for the people who put time in, I've always thought that they're the first people that I'm going to offer or go forward with, depending on them, depending if they want to participate, depending if that's their cup of tea. Because I've always had this as whether a hidden agenda or a real agenda, I've always thought that the people I really interact with, who have been participating with me to some degree, at some point, I'm coming with a lot more than just a few tests. I'm coming with this whole new paradigm toolkit, which has got a lot of different options for a facilitator to play with people. And I've tested them out, they work. And I've got so many of them, and they're good. You know, the results that I've been getting have always been very good in terms of the quality of the discussion, the amount of listening, and the type of conversations that take place as a result of group divination or one-on-one divination. So looking at the larger new paradigm toolkit and looking at card sets as being one of the product lines, and then looking at ally card sets of people who, as originators, have come up with something that is very new or very, you know, so what I'm looking at is a methodology to package that and then have it as a sort of like a business arrangement where there's kind of like, you know, you have a card set within the new paradigm toolkit, and then within the School of Conscious Communication, you would be an originator plus a teacher if you want to teach. And I think that's another thing. It's not just as a facilitator, because you as an originator would be originating, you'd be teaching, you'd be facilitating, depending upon basically what you want to do. So my main thing is design the ideal job where we're going through a process to really identify how do you want to use your gifts, how do you want to use what you have, with who, in which manner, what is the business arrangement? And I'm sort of the person who helps those people find that out as part of my thing. So compared to yours, you know, there seems to be quite a difference. I mean, I think we meet in the friendship space anyway. I mean, I'm not really approaching people that I don't know, and I don't really, I think, do that well with people I don't know that well. I tend to like interacting with the people that I know, because I find they're all very unique. And so another thing is, you know, I found, let's say, of all the people that I've ever did the table with, you would be one of the all-stars. You'd be one of the people who, you know, could really get an insight, could really see something and give something to the people at the table that was very valuable. And that to me, you know, should be honored. That to me is as I see you as an originator, to me, that's like, there's a lot that goes with it. I know what it takes to be an originator. I know what it takes to spend most of your life or half your life or whatever figuring things out in your own way. And other people may not know it, and you may not put yourself in that position, but I've seen it and I've witnessed it and I've admired it. And so, you know, I'll stop there and put it back to you, boss.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, the map that you have behind your head on the screen here, family, friends, intimacy, business, service, social fields for the conversation that we're engaged in. I hear you coming from business and services, business there, service. I heard a little bit of a marketing strategy in your conversation. And then in terms of the relationship that you're talking about between us, which has come in a social space to some degree, and a friendship space is developed. And as you've said, we've talked in the past about, well, I mean, you have been brainstorming, strategizing about different ways of moving forward with your tools in a way that's meaningful for others, that which engages community, which ultimately would bring teams of people together to establish kind of like nodes that have special orientations, and then those role sort of job orientations of teams come together in a larger context. But in order to move forward into using the tools in those team contexts, in those larger matrices of teams at different scales, I guess, that each individual coming to those tables, as it were, would need to use the tools or be familiar with the tools. So there's been two that I'm thinking of, blocks or challenges. Is on the one hand, you're developing the tools and developing yeah, you're in a process of constantly developing the tools and adding modules to the tools. And you've talked about before that when it actually comes to teaching the tools, you're not always so interested in that edge of what needs to develop or happen.
Mhm.
And so you've approached me at different times and asked if I would be interested in taking on that task. And then for myself, based on what other things I have going on in my life, and limitations in my own skill sets, that I'm not in a position just to take on that. As you know, I've been managing and marketing different organizations, and I've already taught different organizations how to use spreadsheets or something to organize their information. Just, yeah, I don't have that kind of academic or business managing. It's those things aren't second nature to me. Um, and then for me to learn some of those skills, say in tangent with yourself, that would take a lot of time. And then it's like, how valuable would that be for yourself, and how committed to that are we, and how much time do we have? And then, are you doing that for free? Are you doing it for a price? So I don't know. I feel like I've touched in on a few things, and I don't know if I'm able to bring them back together in one uh, clear kind of picture.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so then I touched on intimacy, kind of friendship. Part of my challenge in moving forward with individuals is if I don't feel a sense of friendship or intimacy, like that's kind of a driving force in the relationships that I establish, in any field, whether it's my family or in businesses or services or social. And then in that sense of intimacy or friendship, it's like, where is the intuitive, or what's the mutuality in terms of meaning? In a strictly business context, it's like, if I'm at work, there are horizontal relationships. You know, I have a boss, he's paying me a wage to do a job. I'm presently training in a training position that I'm training for, and he's um, putting a fair amount of time, his own time, into training me, but in hopes that what he's training me to do would pay dividends for him down the road, in the sense that he doesn't have to do those tasks himself anymore. And I've wanted to learn those tasks or skills anyways, so that I can carry those skills or forward into say our relationship, just that I feel more competent in how I'm speaking, how I'm communicating. Um, it's just on that note, I feel a strange talking to the computer. I mean, I see you, but just this field of engagement isn't something that I'm comfortable with. It's harder for me to track information within the scope of the conversation, because I don't have a strong feeling sense of it right now, of the intimacy of the context, kind of.
Mhm.
And it's like that kind of grounded intimacy or tangibility of relating with a person is something I think I use to help establish pace, and how I organize my thoughts, as it were, which is not bad. It's a positive challenge. So as you were speaking, pace was one value, or, so I don't know if that's a choice lens or a flow lens.
The flow lens, but it
Yeah.
could be anything, right?
Yeah. But so pace, in that sense of like you're talking about kind of a broad scope, and then it's like, where does the field, where does the Gabriel fit into that scope, which can narrow the bandwidth of how we're engaging in terms of, in regards to that larger scope. And so I hear you saying that in terms of giving me feedback of what you see me in my process, and where you feel I may be a fit in this, in your scheme, in your schematic kind of. And then in regards to our friendship and the continuity, coming back to that word, the loyalty, the continuity of the time that we spent together, that there's value there. And like that, I appreciate the time you've spent with me and what you've shared with me over the years. And we've had the good times, bad times, we've seen it all or whatever. And here we are still trucking. Yeah. So back to pace, it's like, well, what's the starting point? It's like, so what's that point of contact where we both go, okay, there's something that's a point of origin of that establishes a context. So that's kind of coming to the, how do we define that together? And then for me, the continuity or the coherence, for me, coherence is based on that continuity, that we're able to keep coming back in a sense to that point of contact and then build the field. If just looking at a child being born, it's like a plus and a negative. A sperm and an egg comes together, a point of contact. The will of the situation is arcing through that point of contact, which builds strengthens the field, or the field has a certain strength, which allows for the cells to develop into the organism, as it were. So for me, it's like, that's in all of my relationships, in terms of what I see of value of building anything for the future. If it's just built as a synthetic model that's not organically developing, I don't see the value in it, or it doesn't hold value for me. So for me, it's really about that. I don't know what you call it. It's how do we tune into our higher selves together? How do I see your higher self? How do you see my higher self? How do we support the connection between our consensus space when we're talking about language, when we're talking about what fields we're in contextually within our waking daytime space? It's like, these are all the practicalities of our engagement. But then where's that intuition? What's the higher will that's coming into that? And how do we track both of those spaces together and create that bridge, basically? So there's the higher ideal, then there's the nest that it lands in as an egg to birth as a bird, which becomes a tribe of birds, which becomes a nation of birds, whatever. So there's the ideal and then the nest, and how does the nest resonate with the ideal so the ideal can land and be born? So as far as me helping you, if I have something to offer, and then this comes back to, what do I want to teach? What do I want to share in the world? It's like, I want to be an example of that kind of commitment to resonance, and that commitment to tracking through that resonance. And that brings in service, I guess, as a field. So service, intimacy, and friendship within the social space, and then the business for me is kind of the meaning matrix, and that could be financial, or it could be, there's a number of different mediums of, what's the word, currency. What is the current? What is the currency of our exchange in that sense? So how much current do we have? How current are we? So I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, I think you were moving from the establishing the context, getting to, let's say, the root. I think when you're talking about bringing the ideal into the nest, I think
Yeah.
I really like that metaphor, and I like that's you coming with your goal. That's you saying, I'm not going to participate unless that is there. And that's, I think, one of the things I admire in you, in that you have a great deal of integrity around your own feeling, right? You will not alter it for anybody. You will not. And I want to bring up maybe a little bit of clearing here.
Yeah.
I think we got to get to something which I think was part of the reason we grew apart. And you did say something up in the last thing that sort of, where you said, I hate you, or I hate your work, or something, right? You don't remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. It was very tongue in cheek, but
Or was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because, I think that as a result of our differences, and perhaps with my obsession with maps and structures, and the Zen almost say, get rid of all mind, get rid of all concepts, and shut the fuck up.
yeah.
And I see those things and I go, God, that just destroyed my entire everything. Everything. Those fucking Zen bastards.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, do not, the conceptualization is the lie. And I get it. Like I do get it. But I also see that we do use it. Humans use it. And to brush it away first, like Satori, it's not quite Satori's sakes, but it's like, how do we actually, let's say, create that bridge? How do we actually create whatever it is, and use something that helps us go in a different direction? So I have been playing with models as the methodology. Now that may not be what you hate or what you bugs you so much, but I'm just going to give you the open floor.
Yeah.
Two,
Can I make an addendum to that?
yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that, like, let's get it out, let's get it open.
Yeah.
And from there, we can go a bit deeper, but I think, so back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when I say I hate you or I hate what you're doing, tongue in cheek, the you I'm speaking about is myself in some regards. That part of my own inner world that is fixed on words, is fixed on ideas, is fixed on concepts, beliefs, feeling that I actually know things, and then seeing from another angle or another view or another dimensional access point, that what I thought I knew was a photograph, it doesn't have substance underneath it. It's like a memory, say, but it's like I can't really count on the memory because it's just a picture in my mind. Again, if it can have practical implications, but when it really comes into, say, my meditative space or my capacity to hold the witness, to be sort of lucid, my capacity to be lucid, to be open and lucid while still being able to see multiple tangents of information or perspectives or pictures or inner spaces that are juxtaposed or in contrast, and being able to hold multiple perspectives or multiple spatial pictures internally in contrast, even in polarization, and still maintain a kind of lucidity in my inner awareness that is able to track all that information without my compass blinking, without becoming fragmented, and the whole thing collapses back onto nothing, and I'm left to try to build it all up again. Well, if it all collapses into nothing and I have to try to build it back up again, it's like, well, what am I going to, if it fell apart in the first place, whatever methodology or strategies or whatever that I had to build it up in the first place didn't have enough integrity because it fell apart. So if I'm going to use the same methodologies to try to build it back up again, that seems like insanity to me. And when I look at the outer world or the way people operate to a certain degree, it's like that's the status quo of where we are developmentally, and that's all good. Anyways, so some of my frustrations in that sense is just noticing how many different iterations of maps or idea frames or perspectives, and seeing where I've come through those different layers or tangents, and how so many different tangents are in the layers from the past, how they felt so real in the moment or relevant are no longer relevant. They don't hold weight anymore. So there's that. So I'm just contextualizing a little bit and then I said tongue in cheek. I didn't really mean anything. That's sort of the trickster voice coming out of me, just chaosing a moment for the sake of inspiration to follow it or something. It's not personal. It's not. But I want to say what I see, what for me, how I would like to use, or not use, but the value of what you're doing from my perspective. And I'll add a little piece in there and this is contextualizes to what you're doing in terms of how I feel it being valuable, or where it feels difficult to access for me. Because it's like you have all the inflow matrix is all of these maps that are organizing ideas. And all of those maps refer ultimately to territories. And so for anybody to use the maps, they can use the maps to try to discover new territories. Or if they've discovered territories, they can use the maps to help map the territories so other people can access those territories. What I always, not always, but something that's been a constant when I see your work is introducing people to territories and then getting them to do the work of mapping it. So all the spaces in it are blank kind of, and it's like, okay, here's the basic map. Let's enter the territory. How would you organize this territory? So in that sense, and then you could if they're having difficulty, or there can be templates they could use as reference points, but they're actually developing cognition rather than just memorizing something and applying it in different kinds of contexts. So that's one thing. But the other thing is what I'm trying to develop in terms of having cognitive continuity or lucidity while holding multiple perspectives or tangents or contrasts, is that I wasn't raised in a schooling didn't teach me, my parents didn't teach me, most people don't think this way, the capacity to think in pictures. because I'm so tied up in words. To the point where sometimes it's like I look at a word and it's like, what am I looking at? It doesn't have like it does. What's it actually connecting to?
Mhm.
And if somebody has a real strong inner kind of spatial orientation, it's like you say, when you get a different pieces of information, you already have that interior orientation where you have your interior sort of software or operating system. And anytime you get information, you're just plugging information in the matrix or the fractal nature of how your inner world is developed. But if other people don't have that kind of orientation, it's hard for them. It's like they look at a little piece and then it can be interesting, but soon as you go away or the teacher goes away or whatever, it's hard for them to maintain connection to that piece because they don't have that interiority of how to hold that inner spatial cognition. So I see your tools as much as like say you're building a computer interface for information storage, that how you store information, how you negotiate the flow of different kinds of information and conversations, or engaging with an information field through a 2D interface that has multiple layers to it. It's like I see all the potential values of those, like how you've presented your vision in regards to those things. But as a tool that helps to develop cognitive intelligence, because ultimately it's like while engaging with any field or any friends, intimacy, business, services, social, all of those different fields, if you have a real strong cognitive capacity and you don't have a lot of trauma that keeps on hijacking your cognition, say, or you don't have a strong self-hatred or whatever, just things that keep on dragging you down. If you have a strong cognitive capacity, it's like anybody who has the same strong cognitive capacity as you do presently could develop a lot of the tools, I think, that you're talking about. They wouldn't have the whole catalog of them, but just in terms of sitting down in any context, okay, I need to map information radially around a central concept. It's like they have the cognitive capacity to think that way.
Mhm.
So if the situation presents itself, they could probably develop those kinds of spreadsheets. So for me, engaging the maps more in a learning, teaching kind of engagement, it's more about learning how to visualize. So the information, at least in the beginning, is secondary. Thinking, and you've always talked about mapping and geometry. For myself, for the longest time, closing my eyes, even just picturing a triangle in my mind's eye and holding it there was a real challenge. I mean, now I can put a triangle there and I can see it spinning forwards or backwards and see how it changes. You can only see a little bit of the triangle as it flips and stuff. And once in a while, I could maybe spin it in 3 different axes of movement or something, which still isn't that high of a degree of cognition compared to what some people can do, for sure.
Mhm.
But just like recognizing that that type of inner picture capacity, and then to internally spatially start to map and think in those terms. And now we're only talking about within the field of the sort of language or frontal part of the awareness, in terms of having that cognitive space. And then how does that cognitive space engage with relationships, psychic space, higher dimensions, when we're talking about inspiration, intuition, the capacity to imagine, and then how does that translate through kinetics, emotion, language, so the inner and the outer. So I guess that comes back to the bridge of those inner levels of and capacities of development. And then coherence, I guess that way is like, okay, there's a certain development that's self-sustaining at this point. It's coherent, it has continuity, it has strength. If you want to use a new, more spiritual word, my chakras are starting to spin, and I'm starting to feel my central axis. And now my field is strong enough that it's kind of maintaining my Merkaba, so I don't have to keep on coming back to square zero every time I get knocked off balance or whatever. So that's a rant.
I wouldn't call that a rant.
Well, context building and feedback from what I've heard you talking about.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a lot of very important points. And I think that what happens for me is I can get lost in basically product design, like just to kind of like so much time trying now just to kind of complete and finish these things, that the real use of them, how to teach them, who's it good for, why would it be good for? These are big questions that I'm not, I can put my attention there and probably get some answers, but I'm not really in that space yet, because I'm sort of transitioning from that research into the infrastructure and transitioning into the real product, completion.
Yeah.
And that I see that has really taken over my everything in a sense. And as I get more and more focused to get it done, it really changes the nature of who I am. And sort of puts me in a position where there's only so much I can do, right?
Yeah.
And I find one of my greatest fears has been the amount of work that is created by what I'm creating. Like whatever I'm building, there's always more and more and more work. And I haven't even started in it sets yet. Like, imagine 100,000 people with card sets. Imagine trying to run a business when I could barely run myself. So I think when the originator goes into the world, just like with you, what happens to you with 50,000 people saying, hey, I want to take a course? It can happen. And I think, I've been thinking that was going to happen, and I've been but at the same time, I've kept my life pretty simple, and I've got less and less, I guess, as I got more and more focused on getting it finished, I had less, and with COVID, I had less and less interaction with people. And I really saw, wow, why do I spend time with people? How much am I looking for acknowledgement? How am I, all these little things within me that are sort of become more and more obvious as you see people less and less. And I think for all of us, right, this whole COVID thing really created probably a beautiful experience for people to learn about themselves, and to to really get at, like, so many social communication patterns have been stopped or broken or changed, and everybody is using this streaming like this, right? We went into this world, and then if you look at TikTok, where I see probably some of the best expressions, but it's because nobody's in the room. They're talking to the phone. There's no one on the other. There's no one there to disturb you or to stop you or to interrupt you or to question you or anything, right? And that's what I found myself when I was training. by doing the same thing. I think it's a great experience. You know, now again, hundreds of millions of people are doing it, right? Like in our lifetime, we've seen this massive change, and even since we've known each other, right? We were at the beginning of the People's Network. YouTube hadn't come out. You had to pay for your video time, so nobody was doing it, because if somebody got 100,000 hits, you owe somebody 10,000. It's $10,000 or something, right? So we were at a very interesting time of looking at creating media company, and now you're getting to the point now where anyone can. I mean, imagine if all that stuff that is here now was back then, right? At the age we were and what we were trying to do. Like such an amazing jump we've made, right? And so I think with AI too, that a lot of the stuff I've been working on makes more sense to me now with AI. Like it's, you know, a shared knowledge community is basically AI and humans figuring out how to, you know, figure things out. And so I think part of the deeper thing between you and I is I think we're both seekers, we're both searchers, we're both researchers, we're both always trying to learn something. And I think the difference in you and I, you know, I sort of try to learn and teach or build the product. Like I'm always sort of wanting to gain leverage, I guess. And I think with you, you're wanting to gain depth. And so I could, you know, I notice in myself that I can only go so far, because if I go too deep, it might be that I don't actually want to do it, which is something which I think linked into your existential edge, or what you were talking about last time I talked to you. And I've been there, where all of a sudden the language doesn't make sense. Who gives a fuck? The nothingness is way better. Why should I even try to do any of this? Why should, you know, to enter into the human arena and what save the world, to try to make things better, or try to teach anything to anybody? And me, like, where's this got? Like, am I in a position to be a teacher? How can I teach if I'm still, you know, still all of my self-worth issues or self-esteem issues, or whatever it is that says you have to be perfect in order to teach, or you have to be rich in order to teach, or you have to have your shit together in order to teach. And one of my things has been, why do I still feel so shitty? Or why do I you know, why this long list of why do I's, but then when I'm around people, or when I do share some of the stuff I've been learning, I find people have no idea what I'm talking about, or, you know, it's new to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be interest, like there could be interest, there could be, like, neither of us know, one, I think, how far we've gone, and two, we don't really, you know, neither of us have been in a position of sharing our work with a lot of people, right? So we actually have no idea, like, you know, the response, or if people would be interested or not, right? And I think that's yeah, I guess getting back to the let's say we're both explorers. And I think when you're really exploring a lot, it's like some of the things you're telling me have relevance. The things you're telling me are feedback based upon your experience with what I'm working with. It isn't just from nothing, and it's not based upon some shallow interpretation, right? I mean, you've experienced it to whatever degree. We've talked enough about things, spent enough time doing things. So again, that has great value, I believe, because it's, you know, it's based upon experience. It's based upon the truth of your experience. And so let's say we're each of us are exploring, and all of a sudden you realize, well, hey, he's really good at exploring that way, and I'm good at exploring this way. And if we really want to explore in a bigger way, when we share our knowledge, when we share our explorations, both of us get more from it, right? Like it's again that relevance of meaning, and that's something which I think over the years you brought up to me too, in terms of the word relevance. And I think it's a very important core concept. So I think we're coming close to the end of our time,
Mm-hmm.
if we're gonna stay within the parameters of the hour.
Yeah.
But I'd like to say that that type of mutual exploration is very interesting to me.
When you say mutual exploration, you're speaking in part about the cognitive, and how that interfaces with mapping.
Yeah,
Yes, in part.
yeah. I mean, that's, but also all the other stuff you bring that isn't in there and how you do bring that to that, because we're trying to connect it, right? And I think a big part of my weakness is not spending enough time on body, feeling, type presencing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Presencing.
so I get lost in the I get lost in conceptual design, but I do know that, when I started meditating more and then I was spending 3-4 hours a day, going into stillness because nothing else made sense. And I didn't really want to be anywhere else. And
Mm-hmm.
it took over.
Yeah.
And I come out of that with kind of not quite an indifference, but a lot less intensity around, the validity or relevance of my own work. Seeing it for the words, but we're still using words to communicate, right? So there has to be something about it that is useful in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But I see that, if as a team and as if as a larger community, that we figure out how to teach younger people how to communicate, younger people how to have an intimate feel, younger people how to be friends. It's not some big, you don't have to teach them the rocket science, the inflow matrix, right? It's just like, what are the core skills at that bottom level that we have that they need? And how does, like you're saying, the inner capacity, because I think they probably have some incredible inner capacity that they never talk about. They have no one to talk about it with. And we've got these geniuses out there that could take this stuff and, let's say, run, or, who knows what they're doing. But to start the dialogues, to start the, a new type of school. I wouldn't even call it a school, right? But just like interaction between the generations, interaction between people who have done work, who have spent their lifetime figuring something out, and youngers who have come up with their own thing, or they just naturally are gifted, but they could use the interaction, right? So, I mean, that to me is the real goal. All of the other stuff is maybe methodology to have it occur.
Yeah, well, that last point that you made, what I hear you saying is if you have a bunch of kids that have some basketball skills, but they have no place to play basketball, first of all, they don't have as much capacity to develop their skills. But secondly, that just playing basketball by yourself, there's a whole team element that's about learning basketball or team sports. So it's like allowing or giving a space for people to discover their own who they are, essentially, how to talk about that, how to map that experience in their understanding, how to create common language sets together. How do we map our information together to develop continuity, to develop meaning, essentially? And then how do we like extend that into growing community or growing teams? Or those are things that people already do in different regards. But part of it is, for me, is that it's been usurped, like those natural aptitudes that we have as humans, those natural inclinations and drives that we have. Even take basketball. It's like if you take just for the Joe hanging out in his backyard or playing on a men's league in his town or whatever, it's all good. It's like the point of all of that really is, I like doing this thing and I like hanging out with my buddies and drinking beer afterwards, and that's as far as it goes, which has its own value. But then to take it to what drives people to take it to something deeper, well, there's one of the drives I imagine is I feel motivated to really develop this skill, to develop this passion, to take my skill to a level of excellence. I have a drive towards excellence. And even that is something that's people have been doing in multiple fields and many fields and all fields through time. But at the higher scales, there's say the person who owns the basketball teams in the NHL, the association of owners, and the whole development of basketball is they're going after this cup at the end. And that cup has a symbol, or the NBA, it's a symbol. So it's like somebody's figured out how to take other people's excellence and channel it into an excitation and then put a symbol on there to gather everybody's attention and energy from society to maintain the drive. It's like the attention of culture in that sense is the driving force that drives the trains or the vehicles. So it seems part of it is what is just even understanding that kind of, and not for myself, not that is good or it's bad. It's like this is what's going on and it has a form and it has a function. Is that evolutionary? Could it be better? And if it was better, what it would look like? How would it, instead of all of that money going to the top and just hanging there in stasis, how does it then, and you've talked about this a lot of too, how does it come back and feed the strength of the community so the whole body is fucking strong and not just a couple of the eyeballs or whatever? It's like you have these huge eyeballs and the alien head and the rest of the body is skinny and weak. And anyways, so I've lost your volume.
I think you brought the conclusion to the end quite well.
Yeah.
I think like ending with a couple of eyeballs.
Yeah.
It's been great to see you. It's been great to chat. And I think for anyone listening, might be a bit of a new experience to jump into the Captain Sweep in the field discussion. But I'll meet again next Monday night if you want, and we'll continue this.
Do you have a note or just continue the conversation on another platform about, it'd be nice to have, like, what are we kind of aiming to next week, or what's the takeaways from today for you and perhaps, and what might be a setting point for next week, or
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'll definitely think about it because I think we should always bring some divination in, like you said. I think we should.
Yeah, I'd love to take the cards out next time.
Yeah.
You have a simple 4-card with values or something.
Yeah. Well, let's just sit with it, and I'm sure something will come up. And
good.
And all I know is when I'm speaking with an originator, try not to put any parameters down because they're never going to use them.
Well, yes, and that's part of my thing is I like some kind of something that's tangible that keeps connecting the dots.
Okay. So I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Much love to you and your loved ones.
Oh.
And we'll see you soon.
And if anybody does listen out there to you, love to you as well.
Thank
Peace
you very
out.
much. Bye.
Okay.